Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Steph Scott and I am a researcher at Newcastle University the types of research I do tend to focus on young people, people who are having maybe classed as vulnerable or at risk. They might have been involved with the police or been to prison or might have issues with drug and alcohol use. I am a social scientist, and what I mean by a social scientist is someone who studies the social world and the people who are in it. So, in other words, I study you and me and our interactions with the other people around us and with the institutions that are around us. And an institution could be school, it could be something like the government or the law or just other aspects of sort of society and culture that we interact with all of the time. So our project was called Lockdown Life Northeast. So we asked young people who were aged between 13 and 17 to keep a diary for 4 to 6 weeks about their experiences of the end of lockdown. We started collecting diaries with young people in around about July. We weren't interested in that real national hard lockdown period because there were other studies collecting data on that. And we wanted to talk to people about almost that little grey area between coming out of lockdown, being in the summer holidays, and we wanted to talk to people about going back to school as well. So we asked young people to keep a diary for 4 to 6 weeks and then talk to us over the phone at the end. So we obviously can't be in a room with young people at the moment, or anybody really other than your household, unless you're at school. So we asked young people to send us those diary reflections by email, by social media, by text message if they were uncomfortable with things like email or social media. We said that the reflections could be text, like the way you would normally write something down in a diary, or if they felt that a picture or a song or anything else that was quite creative captured how they felt that day, they could send that to us too. And really what we wanted to find to talk about was young people's journey in and out of lockdown. And that was pre-local lockdowns. So I guess what we're also capturing is people's movements back in to sort of lockdown situations as well, especially as the Northeast is now classed as an area of high risk in that 3-tier system that we're working to at the moment. What I'm going to talk to you about now is 3 different areas that we've found results on. Those are interlinked areas, so they all kind of come together to kind of capture young people's experiences. So I'm going to focus on mental health and the impacts of lockdown on mental health, the impacts of the pandemic on how that interrupted this school year, and how much young people feel a sense of responsibility for other people's health. We have a lot of sort of research going on at the moment that would suggest that children and young people are going to be one particular population group who are going to experience repercussions of the pandemic for a really long time. And what we found in our study was real widespread loneliness, almost a sense of loss for the life that existed pre-pandemic, boredom and real anxiety about what was going to come next. So kind of put in some of the quotations from young people, just so you can kind of get a sense of what those young people told us in their diary reflections. But things like about missing friends, missing physical contact came up quite a lot, missing being able to hug friends and family, and that sort of real sort of freedom to laugh, because everything we do remotely is really constrained and prearranged, and it was a spontaneity that was missing. However, young people told us about real positive things too. So they talked about new hobbies. So some people had wrote letters to each other. Some people had taken up all kinds of things like baking, and and had done lots of things with family that they wouldn't have done previously. So they talked about real strengthened family bonds. They also recognised that without technology, coping with the pandemic would have been incredibly difficult, much more difficult than it is right now. And most of the participants that we spoke to want schools to remain open. However, there was frustration and confusion with some of the school rules, and dealing with cases at school and the periods of isolation that come with those cases mean that many of the young people in our study have faced interruptions to their school year. So they talked about actual isolation periods because they'd been in close contact. Some of the young people in our study had to be tested themselves, so they were able to reflect on that experience. They also talked about parts of their curriculum not being taught and not being on exams because it had been missed during national lockdown. But for some real, purist subjects, that isn't possible because you've got to teach one element before you teach another. So some young people felt like they were really, really grappling and having to work harder to keep up, and that was causing anxiety. For the young people who went through the exam results in summer, their GCSE results, some felt like they did not deserve their results because they hadn't physically sat an exam. And that's really quite heartbreaking in some ways. And that meant that they were really concerned about that leap to A levels and that leap to college. Which actually, if we think about teenagers and young people, we often think that should be a really carefree time, possibly even a really selfish time. But young people in this study were really frustrated about people not following the rules, and face masks were part of those rules, and they felt that if they had to wear them, everybody else should be abiding by the rules too. They discussed FOMO, so that the fear of missing out, and that a real frustration that they were missing out because they had chosen to follow the rules. In terms of next steps, we are applying for a little bit of money to extend the study. If we can do that, what we'd really like to do is follow young people throughout this entire school year and, record their experiences throughout this really interrupted and strange year. And we're also planning a national event to link with other studies that have focused on young people and lockdowns and pandemics. So there's work going on in Manchester, in Bristol, and in London and in Oxford, and we're really keen that everybody can come together and present their results and learn from each other, really. You might think to yourself, oh, well, could I be a social scientist? And if you did a bit of a Google search, career advice will list skills like project management, IT skills, and things like handling data and handling budgets. And those are really valuable skills. And that is absolutely true that you need those skills. But there are really valuable hidden skills to the types of research that I do. So I guess one thing might be to be curious or even to be nosy about people's lives. Part of what I do is to do interviews with people, and that involves asking a lot of questions about sometimes really sensitive things, but also some really fun things, and it can really, really help to be nosy. I'm also very chatty, and that's one thing that can help, especially if you have somebody who is quite young or even quite old, or maybe even somebody who just has never been asked to tell anybody about their lives before. I think it's really important to be able to work as a team. Most research projects involve a team rather than just one person on their own. And I work with a whole host of different people with different specialisms. So things like statisticians and people who are interested in economics or who are interested in being able to tell everybody about research findings. So policy, people who come up with policies, and people who work with people in practice where they might learn from the research that we do. And one thing that might not necessarily be a skill, but might be something that's important for wanting to be a researcher, is almost feeling like there are parts of the world that need to change, and that maybe if we collect enough research on something, we might be able to change parts of the world.